Good morning, everybody. Today we are going to be continuing on with our Unit 12 while we're discussing fractions. And so far in the unit, we've talked about fractions that fall between 0 and 1. So if we look at a regular number line that you've seen since kindergarten or even before, okay, the whole numbers, the regular numbers that we know, they just count 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. We've been focusing here between 0 and 1. So here we're zooming in to this space between 0 and 1, and think about if you took a camera and zoomed in, it would expand. Okay, so this is where we are between 0 and 1. Now we've talked about fractions. I'll use the most basic example I can, 1/2. Okay, so 1/2 literally takes the line, the space between 0 and 1, and divides it in half. So you get 1/2 and you get 2/2 that equal 1 whole. Okay, so again, 0, 1/2, 2/2. Now, today's lesson 12-5, we're going to be seeing fractions that go beyond 1. So instead of going in our fractions lying between 0 and 1, which all regular fractions do lie between 0 and 1, okay, we're going to be going beyond 1. So we'll mostly see fractions that fall in this space here between 1 and 2, okay, and still some between 0 and 1. All right, so if we look at this number line here, you can see that we are zoomed in between 0 and 2 now. Okay, so here's 0 and 1, and here's between 1 and 2. So I'm still going to use 1/2 as an example, okay? So if I look here, okay, between 0 and 1, I see 1 space, 2 spaces. So the fraction, the denominator that we're dealing with is 2, so halves. So we can determine the denominator by counting the spaces between 0 and 1. 1, 2. Okay, so we know that this is 1/2. All right, and we also know that the whole number 1 can be represented as 2/2. So I'm going to write it up here, 2/2. Okay, so here's 1/2 and 2/2. Now, if I continued counting halves, I would just continue counting the numerator. We see the numerator's gone 1, 2, and then this will be 3/2. Okay, so we have 1/2, 2/2, 3/2. So what do you think the whole number 2 is represented as if we're talking about halves? It's 1/2, 2/2, 3/2, 4/2. And I just want to point out to you that fractions are very closely related to division. Okay, what's 4 divided by 2? 4 divided by 2 is 2. Okay, so a fraction line can be looked at like a division symbol. 4 divided by 2 equals 2. So just to review this number line from 0 to 1, okay, we determine the denominator by counting the spaces between 0 and 1. 1, 2. So we know we're dealing with halves, okay? So we have 1/2, 2/2, 3/2, 4/2. If you notice, we always said that when the numerator and denominator are the same, like 2/2, it equals 1. And think, 2 divided by 2 is 1. And then think about the numerator is less than the denominator, like this, 1/2. The 1 is smaller than the 2. That means it's less than 1. And when the numerator is bigger than the denominator, like 3/2 and 4/2, that number is bigger than 1. We could keep going, 5/2, 6/2, and it would go past 2. But we'll stop there for this one. Okay, now, here's a different number line, okay? Basically, it's the same one here, but I am going to change it. So we just looked at, okay, halves, okay, but now we're going to look at fourths. Remember what I said, to turn halves into fourths, you can divide the 1/2 in half. Okay, and now I took that 1/2 and I divided it in half here, and I divided it in half here. Now we have, let's count to find our denominator. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 parts between 0 and 1. That means our denominator is going to be 4 every time. Okay, so we have 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, and of course 4/4 equals 1. All right, now, okay, again, we started with 1/2. I'm going to turn it into fourths. A half divided by a half is 1/4. And then I'm going to turn this over here into fourths. So again, we're dealing with fourths because 1, 2, 3, 4 parts between 0 and 1. So we're still dealing with fourths. All right, and so we had 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, 4/4, 5/4, 6/4, 7/4, 8/4. Think back to what I asked you earlier. 4 divided by 2 is 2. Well, what's 8 divided by 4? 8 divided by 4 is 2. So that's why fractions can be represented as whole numbers and whole numbers can be represented as fractions. Okay, now let's move on to this number line. Again, we're looking between 0 and 1. Very important that you find the denominator first. Let me restate that. When dealing with fractions that go beyond 1, it's very important for you to determine the denominator that you're dealing with, the bottom number or the total or the whole. Okay, so to do that, you have to look between 0 and 1. So here, we're going to count from 0 to 1 to see how many parts we're dealing with. 1, 2, 3. Then if I count, you could also count between 1 and 2. It's still going to be the same number of parts. 1, 2, 3. So again, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. We're dealing with thirds. Okay, and now to find the numerator, you just have to count along on the number line to see how far along each point is. So here is from 0, 1/3, 2/3, 3/3, and remember 3 divided by 3 equals 1. Then we're just going to keep counting. 4/3, 5/3, and 6/3. And remember, 6 divided by 3 equals 2. That's just extra information I'm giving you for today. All right, here's another example. Again, we're not given the denominator, so we need to find the denominator, okay? So in order to do that, we're going to look between 0 and 1 and count the total number of parts. 1, 2, 3, 4. So we're dealing with fourths, just like we were down here. Now I might put a point here, and I might say what fraction is represented on that point, or what is the length between 0 and that point. Different questions might be presented to you. So again, you need to find the denominator first. In order to do that, you need to count between 0 and 1 to find how many total parts. 1, 2, 3, 4. So we're dealing with fourths. So I know that this point is going to be a certain number of fourths. And now, in order to find the numerator, I count along. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that's 6/4. All right, now you might see a number line that looks like this, where you're given a lot of the different parts, but you're given two missing points. All right, so I might say, what's this point? Or what's this point? Or I might ask for both those points. Okay, as you can see, we're dealing with sixths. Since this goes up to 6/6, we should know that we're dealing between 0 and 1. We are moving beyond 1, but you're also going to see fractions that still fall just between 0 and 1. So you'll see a mixture of what you've learned and then new information as well. All right, so to find this point, I know it's sixth already. 1, 2, this is 3/6, which, by the way, is equal to 1/2. And then 4/6, and then so this is 5/6. Remember, whenever a numerator, if you doubled it, you got the denominator, 3 and 3 is 6, that means that you're dealing with a fraction equal to 1/2. For example, 5/10, 6/12, 7/14, they are all equal to 1/2. 8/16, and that pattern goes on forever. Okay, let's see. Okay, let's look at this one here. All right, they might give you a number line and ask you to choose the option A, B, C, or D that completes the number line. So you need to use your visual reasoning. You need to use your eyes to space out equally the missing parts. So if this was 2/4, that would mean that there's 4 total parts between 0 and 1, and every part would be equal, or every space would be equal. So, okay, you can see that we're dealing with fourths, but we're only given 2 parts, 1, 2. So we sort of have to convert this into fourths. Think back to what I did earlier here. To take a half, because we're looking at halves right now, 1/2, 2/2, we're looking at 1/2. We want to convert it to fourths. You can cut that, each half, in half. So I'll cut this half in half, and I'll cut this half in half, and I'll be looking for the number line on your work today, on the Practice Buddy, that completes the number line accurately. So I'm looking for the one that has 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, and this might be 1, or it might be 4/4. Remember, 4 divided by 4 is 1. Okay, here, as I said earlier, you might see a number line that asks you to find the length of the line in fractions. So you'll be given a line, or you'll be given a point, and you need to just find the fraction that's being represented. Remember, you need to find the denominator first, the bottom number first. In order to do that, count the total parts between 0 and 1. 1, 2, 3. So I'm dealing with thirds. Okay, this is 1/3, 2/3, 3/3, and that length would be represented as 4/3. Okay, finally, this last problem. You're given a number line, and if you look at it quickly, you should be thinking, okay, the parts, they're not spaced out properly, okay? What you're given here is an incomplete number line, and you need to find the number line, the choice that completes it, all right? Similar to how we did, by the way, did I complete it? So we had 1/4, 2/4, so this is 3/4, okay? Similar to how we did there. Okay, again, we're dealing with fourths. I did that on purpose to sort of keep it consistent so that you can see similar number lines, all right? So again, we're given a big space here, then we're given 2/4, 3/4, and the number 1, which is 4/4. 5/4, and a big space again. We're given 5/4 and 7/4. Well, what comes between 5 and 7? It's 6/4. 7/4, and 8/4. Remember, 8 divided by 4 equals 2. That's why we get the whole number 2. Just like 4 divided by 4 equals 1. That's why we get the whole number 1. And then we would have to find this little part here that we didn't. 1/4. So problems like that, you need to use your visual reasoning to space them out properly with your eyes. I can see that being a little confusing for the first day of 12-5, but of course we'll clarify any confusion on day 2 of 12-5 when I review the practice buddy. All right, so that's it for today. This was a big lesson, a very important lesson, so please take your time and do your best work, and have a great day.